So let me tell you a little bit about Fallen Fruit. Fallen Fruit is David Burns and Austin Young, who are multidisciplinary artists based in LA. They began their work in 2004 by mapping fruit trees growing in their LA neighborhood that were on public property, but on private property, but hanging over into public space. The collaboration, which at the time was 3 people, has now expanded to include serialized public projects, site-specific installations, and happenings in various cities around the world. They always work with fruit as a material or media. Their visual work includes an ongoing series of narrative photographs, wallpapers, everyday objects, and video works that explore the social and political implications of our relationship to fruit and the world around us. Recent curatorial projects, and I would call Paradise a curatorial project of theirs, remix the social and historical complexities of museums, archives, and reinstall permanent collections. They have realized projects around the globe, but some of the major projects that you might be familiar with happened at LA County Museum of Art, the Hammer Museum at UCLA, the Atlanta Center for Contemporary Art, Prospect 3 in New Orleans, and most recently, St. John the Divine Cathedral in New York City. So I also want to just give a shout out to Caldera, who, the arts organization that helped bring Fallen Fruit to Portland, as part of a Creative Heights grant that they received from the Oregon Community Foundation. So thank you to Caldera for doing that, having the vision, and then for pulling the museum in. And then in terms of Paradise, the exhibition, the installation here at the museum, that was supported in part by the Miller Meigs Endowment for Contemporary Art, the Paul G. Allen Family Foundation, individual donors like Joe Witzel, ARC Document Solutions, and our larger exhibition series sponsors. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Fallen Fruit. Please join me in welcoming David Burns and Austin Young.
Where are our microphones? Oh, I thought they were up here, sorry. Is this, no, that's not on. Hello? Oh, here we go, okay. Hi, I'm David.
I'm Austin.
And we're the 2 artists of Fallen Fruit. We're gonna explain our work in a particular way. One, looking a little bit at the past of how we got here, and then we're gonna spend a lot more time on Portland specifically. But in the beginning of this talk, we really wanna take a moment to thank the people we got to work with, not just here in the museum, but also in Portland at large.
Yeah, it's incredible being able to do a project here at Portland Art Museum with Stephanie and the curatorial team and Don in collections.
Brian, the director, all had the ability to allow us to take some risks and to do something that really stretches our work and our ability to make as much as maybe the museum's ability to create something contemporary that is also taking a risk. Outside of this particular institution, we also got a lot of support from Caldera and the city archives, Portland Fruit Tree Project, Friends of Trees, and there's a large group of different institutions and people that really supported this body of work. So it isn't just 2 guys standing here making stuff, it's us being in collaboration with a lot of different things to really celebrate what we saw in Portland as being really special. Anyway, so let's start. In the beginning, we started this project in 2004, as Stephanie mentioned, as a really small idea. We were inspired by a call for projects or ideas from a magazine, a publication called the Journal of Aesthetics and Protest. And at the time, there were 3 of us. There was another collaborator named Matthias Wegner, and the past couple of years, we've carried on. However, what we did with the 3 of us together was look at our neighborhood. The magazine posed the question, is it possible to use the agency of activism without opposition? So can you make something that isn't against anything? And what would that look like?
So we noticed in our neighborhood that there were a lot of fruit trees that were either in public space or hanging over the sidewalk. So So we thought we would create a map of these trees and think about maybe the margins of public and private space, things like if a tree was in someone else's yard and hanging over public space, did the public have a right to pick that fruit tree?
And also, we really wondered, like, who is the public? I mean, what is the rights to citizenship? Do you have to live there? Are you passing by? Do you need an ID card? Are you just, walking down the road? And who makes a community this way? And not just the people involved in the neighborhood, but what is that boundary between public and private? And who negotiates that boundary? And who has the rights to decide what that means?
Well, we were also thinking about how LA and other cities are driving cities, and we don't really know our neighbors anymore. And could we create a way for people to walk a neighborhood and meet neighbors and be more friendly?
So we made a lot of maps. We traveled everywhere we go. We get excited about learning about other neighborhoods that have this kind of clandestine sense of generosity and spirit, where the streets, by other people's choices, are lined with fruit that celebrate a place in this really kind of passive, idealistic, wonderful way.
We did this as a contemporary artwork also, and it's interesting. When we started, we really shined a light on the idea of foraging and having fruit in public space.
So this is just an example of what would look like hedges, but this is in Southern California, and what's wonderful about this particular image is that these trees are all different types of citrus trees. So in Los Angeles, this actual sidewalk is ever-bearing, and you can just, instead of going to the grocery store, you can walk next door and get your oranges or lemons or whatever, and they happen to be mostly organic.
At the time, it was such a new idea that we actually did walking tours of collecting fruit in public space.
So we'd go at the edge of darkness, not to be covert. The opposite, everybody's home after work. So we wanted people to come out and like, what's this shopping cart doing? And who are these people? And we would talk to them about fruit, like bananas on sidewalks. And these two girls were so surprised by the smallest banana they'd ever seen on a public street.
So we really began to realize that, especially in our neighborhood, seeing all the trees picked to the edge of somebody's property, we started to think more about planting fruit.
So this is exciting for us. This is in Tijuana, Mexico, at the border of the US. And if we go to the next slide, oops, other way. There we go. That is the actual border between the United States and Mexico. So for that particular neighborhood, Colonia Federal, we elected to, with collaboration of Giacomo Castañon, who helped design the barrels, we used 55-gallon barrels. Because it's a transient neighborhood and a transient culture, then people can push the trees to the next friend set that they have that's still staying there, so they can be cared for in this way that's appropriate for that place.
We planted a fruit park in Madrid, got on the front cover of El País. That was really fun. We planted the first public fruit park in California as a contemporary art piece, public art piece.
It was a lot of negotiating. You can see Austin there. He's a very patient man.
It took about a year to get that through the city because most cities don't allow fruit in public space or parks. And so this is just kind of on the verge of changing. But we got these trees approved by calling them sculpture or artwork.
Yeah. The only way that we could get around city ordinances was to declare our art material as organic matter, and that the trees are actually sculptural objects that will just persist. And what's wonderful about that is on the register of artwork for the County of LA, should a tree get damaged, it's required to be replaced with the exact same variety of tree in perpetuity.
This got us thinking even bigger by thinking about urban fruit trails.
So what we came to realize from all this work over almost 12 years is that cities really haven't been redesigned since the end of World War II. And the original thoughts for cities created a dense population that got filled into suburban areas, but these suburban areas were not places designed, let's go back one for about food, that they weren't designed to have a relationship to food. They had a relationship to freeways. And what we've come to understand is that in the 21st century, this is a really good time for us to collectively, as an entire nation, an entire generation, to just think about what a city might be like.
The interesting thing about planting fruit in public space is, like say for example, it could be, you could think about just planting in the parkways. Well, in most cities that's actually not possible because the Parks and Recs won't allow fruit in the parkway in front of the sidewalk, in between the sidewalk and the street. So we came up with the thought that we could just invite people to plant in front of their property, and then we could map the tree and create a network of walking trails called the urban fruit trails. So anyone, anywhere can be a part of it just simply by getting a tree and planting it in front of their yard. As a way to make your neighborhood more generous and share with neighbors, kind of a new experience of a city.
This urban fruit trail project has allowed us to really extend the body of work that we're making into other cities, and that's one of the things that's exciting about it. So we've been able to get permission to now work often with the Parks Department or with schools that have open access. Some of the places we were able to be successful in the past year is in Bronx, New York, and also in Manhattan, Omaha, Nebraska, Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. There's 2 more public fruit parks going in Los Angeles, and there's 3 urban fruit trails which are connecting through neighborhoods, and then also Portland.
So if anyone wants to be a part of the urban fruit trails, you can email us at info@fallenfruit.org. Maybe send an address or pictures of the fruit tree, and we'll put it on this large scale map that we're doing.
So this is actually yesterday, and I wish I understood the neighborhoods a little bit better, but the property is called Open Meadow School, and it's off Lombard and Emerald. But you guys know where that is.
So
I just went there.
So we actually planted a public fruit park there, and then also got neighbors to adopt trees and plant them and map them around the area.
At the edges of public space, of course, so that we are not just going around discovering these neighborhoods, and what's happening now is that we're generating these neighborhoods in collaboration with anyone who wants to participate. One of the things, this is really cool, one of the things that happened this time was these artist-designed boxes you'll see in a second.
Larry Yes helped make this happen with positive slogans that the youth wrote on the panels.
So this project here is in collaboration with Portland Fruit Tree Project and also with Caldera and Caldera Youth to make these forms of public artwork possible. It takes a lot of people. It isn't just one person running around doing stuff. So there's this word called social practice or public participatory art, and it's a word that gets kicked around a lot in the last 10 years, but it kind of questions authorship, like who's the maker? Because in the old ways of looking at art, they want you to have a paintbrush or maybe a camera to make sure you're an artist. And we didn't like that thought. So what we learned to do and the way we learned to collaborate was this particular project that started in 2005. It's called the Public Fruit Jam. And what we do is make jam with the general public, typically on the sidewalks of a city, knives, fruit, sugar, cookers, the whole thing. There's no age limit, there's no instructions. We don't use recipes, you use your intuition. And if you're really good, you're hanging out with someone else's grandma.
But what we learned doing from this is as art makers is the importance of fruit in culture. It got a lot deeper for us because people would come and they would tell stories about their family and their rural past and
storing apples for the winter.
Their apple pie recipes, just all the
don't
ways
like
that
bananas.
fruit is embedded in culture.
Oh, cool. I like that you like that.
We created a project called Lemonade Stand, where we thought about how
Lemonade Stand is a project that we created originally at the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. And around that particular museum, there is a large population of homeless people or people that don't have addresses. And the museum was really concerned about this group of people having access to what we do.
Well, they actually wanted to cordon us off in the back of the museum and have people have wristbands to come and join our project. It was something that we weren't used to doing. So we thought we'd create a lemonade stand and do it in front of the museum, where everyone could join us. So
and they didn't think anyone would participate, but ironically, we not only had the homeless population sharing stories about their lives and drawing portraits on lemons, which you'll see in a second.
we didn't. We
but
don't have pictures of them here.
Yeah, we do. But we.
Because they're really dressed well in Portland.
She's not homeless. She's awesome. But
she has diamonds in her teeth.
I know, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
The way the lemonade stand goes is that in exchange for a glass of lemonade, people draw a portrait of themselves on a lemon without using a mirror. And then what we do is like a photo booth, if you back up one, where we take portraits of the people with their portrait, and then we take a portrait of the lemon without the people. And the goal of the piece is to create a snapshot of a community through caricature. So you see the joy or the sadness in the stranger or the passerby.
Some of these are.
Cool. Yes, there's a lot of fruit in art and art history. In 2008, this is a while back, there was a project called Machine Project that Mark Allen in Los Angeles created, and they were invited to take over LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, for one day. And they invited artists to come in and help change the way the museum might be perceived or perform. What we did with Fallen Fruit was map all the fruit in the paintings of the permanent collection.
This really grew our practice as well, and we began thinking about how much meaning each fruit can really have. I mean, thousands of years of stories and just things like Adam and Eve. And
what happened was, from looking at these paintings, this is Barron's still life, is that we realized that fruit is a special thing, and it was this epiphanal shift moment where we recognized that fruit can be the subject of something at the same time it's an object. And while it's both a subject and an object, it still is symbolic, and it has emotional meaning, and it is transnational now. Its original origins and history are now bilocated with other geographies. And so as art makers, we realized fruit was really a material that we could use to make art, as much as it could just be something we play with.
So, we can go into
In 2009, this was our first exhibition. It predates LACMA by a small amount, but it was the first time that we made a show about fruit, and it was for Los Angeles Contemporary Art Exhibitions, LACE. And we focused on the bananas and the origin of the bananas in Colombia. What the result of this show was a critique or a review that, and unfortunately it's highlighted on our screen, but it isn't for you. But it says up here, the artistic dilemma lies in how to translate productive social practice into something that is more than just thinly didactic. And it was a very negative review or critique of what we did. They thought we were being kind of like cultural tourists or imperialistic. And so we really perceived that as being like, wow, these guys are kind of making wallpaper, which we were not thinking we were doing. However, the next show we did is LACMA, and what we did do is make wallpaper. So
we went out on the street one day and just picked all the fruit that we could find in public space, which was mostly citrus. So we created a sort of classic Victorian pattern.
And we asked to re-curate or reselect out of the permanent collection artwork about fruit. And the exhibition space, this is the way it looked. It allowed us to use Edgerton with with Liechtenstein and really mix up an encyclopedic collection in a museum.
But we were really just thinking about fruit then. It's got apples, bananas.
Oranges, let's forget about Liechtenstein, don't worry about Edgerton.
And then along with it, we did something similar. We did kind of something similar that we did here. We had on one day we had 50 different artists kind of do site-specific work.
This is Adam Overton performing California Nature Boy as Adam
and this is Michelle Carr doing the banana dance.
by Josephine Baker.
This is
Animals of Distinction performing a piece with lemons about relationships. It was really intense. They didn't use their hands and would drink Pepto-Bismol, and then just using their mouth, they'd have to destroy the lemon.
we did a tomato fight. This is Gene Dunning's tomato fight.
Yeah, it was amazing. We asked for bleachers, and there was 1,500 pounds of tomatoes.
There was a watermelon eating contest by Miss Barbecue.
And anyone could join in. And then Fallen Fruit made this. It's called Fallen Fruit Drop.
Anyone could go and drop fruit from the third story of the BCAM building, and there was a majorette and a
Cheerleader.
Yeah. That's
So
what
we
it
made
looked like.
Fallen Fruit. The public could make Fallen Fruit. Wallpaper patterns. So after LACMA, it was really fun and successful. So we decided to make wallpaper patterns for other cities. This is Salt Lake City, all the apple blossoms off the sidewalks.
And this is Atlanta. We did peaches, and this is Hawaii. We did we borrowed fruit from fruit vendors in Chinatown and photographed the fruit. This is lemons for Santa Barbara. It used to be the site of lemon groves.
Pineapples for Brisbane, Australia, the origins of pineapple plantations for that part of the world.
We did bananas for San Diego. It's the port where a lot of the bananas come in from North America, or to North America.
And we made this installation with the wallpaper called Rainbow Bridge, Banana Edition.
It's Scratch and Sniff. So, and then we did a smart car wrapping. It's cool. And we should pass over this.
No, we'll just go quickly.
Okay.
So we're trying to keep the time going, and we want to talk about the show here, but we also, sorry to take a moment, we're rushing because we want to also have you guys understand the progression of the work we do, and that we just didn't plop in here and have it all show itself. In Utah, it's the show we did in 2011 after LACMA, and we did the same strategy, except we borrowed works from 11 institutions along with the general public. So to create an installation that was 5,000 square feet, looking at the history of Utah through fruit. In this case, there's 3 paintings here, and they're all about watermelon. And what we learned from this show is that when we put the paintings of fruit together, and we started organizing by this kind of naive way, the meaning of the painting shifted. So instead of seeing watermelon, 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 apple, what you'd end up seeing is racism, 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 misogyny. And that as an art maker, our ability to manipulate the context and content of what something might mean is very similar to how we learned about public and private space. There's a boundary that we can play with.
We also were really interested in, just whatever images with fruit had ended up in Salt Lake City. So, and then our next big show like that we did in Atlanta, and we were thinking about peaches, and we thought about Georgia peach, and also we thought we'd sort of move beyond ideas of fruit, so we thought of doing portraits. And first we had people make portraits of themselves on peaches, and these are all portraits that were probably kids between like 2 and 4, sort of.
So these are kind of our favorites, like the peach that has 5 eyes. It's pretty spiritual.
And we asked private collectors or institutions, individuals, just for portraiture that could be paintings, drawings, anything, and
the way the work was installed as a 3,000 square foot gallery it's about 300 portraits of other people's families, including self-portraits. Some of them were real artwork. That's a Salvador Dali, for example. But they weren't hung in this precious way, and they weren't behind stanchions. They, again, were collected by many institutions. But what we did as an installation strategy was that they were installed from birth until death. So what happened as a viewer in the room, that you would unconsciously maybe end up in that place where you are in your life by age, but looking at other people's lives. And that was one way that the room really operated. And then the other way that the room seemed to operate as an artwork is that you would see again the subtext of people's lives come forward. So in the case of Atlanta, you often saw images that had to deal with race, and you saw images that had to do with class, and you had images that really spoke to issues of gender equality. This is a piece for Brisbane, Australia. We realized that the history of kitsch and cultural tourism really anchors to these tropical themes in the mid-century after World War II via pineapples. And for Skirball Center in Los Angeles, we did a program that is about love. Pomegranates symbolize love in most ancient cultures. And so we asked the public to submit images via the internet of someone they love and installed the room in a similar strategy to that of Atlanta. And now we're go to Paradise.
That's a lot of information.
It is. That's okay.
Okay. So when we were thinking, we got the opportunity to do a show in Portland, Oregon, and with Portland Art Museum, and we also realized we were just going to be looking using the Portland Art Museum's collection to create the show.
So part of our research in doing this is thinking about a place and thinking about what the place might mean. So of course the Oregon Trail is something that very much speaks to this area.
We were thinking about how maybe people got here, how they decided to move to Oregon, and Oregon was sold as a paradise at the time to the settlers.
The part of the research also is us looking at what came here, what did people bring here, and these two images are the plaster casts, or some of the plaster casts that are replicas of the Greco-Roman sculpture, which we used in the installation, but also this archive is well known for.
So we were thinking about when people come, they bring not only fruit but also culture, and here's an image depicting Manifest Destiny, the idea that the United States should go from coast to coast, and we should remove the native peoples.
And transform the culture of the West. Apples are a big part of that story because they store well. It's just practical, and they became really the signature, Johnny Appleseed and otherwise, the signature of the United States. But along with this signature of what American as apple pie might mean, there's also a morality that echoes maybe the Garden of Eden. And that morality comes west as well. But it's a morality that was preceded by thousands of years of other cultural ideas. So for us, it's a fascinating way of exploring.
We were just thinking about the apples. So we went to Hood River and we found Draper Farms, and we started taking photos of apples there.
Even in the dead of winter.
We wanted to create an apple pattern for the museum here and for Portland. And we were also sort of thinking about, apples are not native here; they were brought over, and this Victorian theme, this kind of pattern would reflect that time period. The
reason why we use a Victorian pattern as the repeat or the aesthetics for the wallpaper is because the era in history that these kinds of wallpapers and salon-style hangings were popular happens to be the exact same time in history in which museums were established in North America and library systems and the ideas of public bodies of knowledge or public trust. When we came here the first time and did our research, this is the Bierstadt Mount Hood painting that typically would be in the American collection. We were really struck by this painting and quickly learned that it's sort of a fictitious painting, meaning Mount Hood really is there. However, it is not here in that the actual depiction or painted qualities of that landscape are actually adjusted from correct geography. But we looked at a lot of other paintings and worked with the curators.
Thoughts by Sherry Wolf, who's amazing, a painter.
And we went through the print collections. That's a Mary Cassatt. Deep storage. More deep storage. More deep storage. More checklists. We went through hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of objects.
Just really looking to create a story, so thinking about Paradise and looking to create a story from the collection. So we were really struck by all of the clear-cutting images from the 1800s and prints of loggers cutting wood.
And we thought about using this Schnitzer exhibition space. So early on, we kind of thought about how the public behaves in the idea of history and how the meaning of place performs itself in the meaning of history. So for this exhibition space, if you've walked in the room, which I'm assuming you guys have, there's a very large platform in the middle which mimics the pedestal of a sculpture. But on top of that, we put every sculpture of a single human form that we were allowed to use into an assembly of what would mimic the public, frozen throughout different eras of history and different cultural contexts. What ends up happening are you get these replicas of like the thorn puller next to Venus again in the French and contemporary art making, that the portraits of people are somehow funny in the way they represent each other in an art history way. The other thing that we were really excited about was that when people get together in a group, you actually stand next to each other kind of close typically, but you don't really touch. In a museum, the way the museums often depict humans is in isolation on an island of a white cube, somewhere in the room next to a painting or looking at a wall. But in this case, we wondered what happens if you put all of these sculptural objects together that represent people and had them look back at you.
Yeah,
In
we
this case, you
were
could look-
thinking about the sculpture as maybe the crowd, the people, and then we thought of the wallpaper on the walls as the landscape.
The selections of masks from the Native American collection we were excited to get to work with. And one of the great call-outs is this mask down here at the bottom.
Oh yeah, it's pre-contact, and it was an unknown piece in the collection, I think since the 1940s, and Dina was able to, she put a lot of energy into finding out that it was a rare.
It's a very rare pre-contact mask, which is why it was
from
not
this area.
cataloged correctly.
Yeah.
So it was great find. Other historical photography of people and landscapes.
We called that wall Manifest Destiny, with the Indian masks in the center, and they're surrounded by these Edward Curtis images and logging photos from the time period.
And then the Bierstadt, of course, anchors the next wall, which is the way we thought about paradise and how landscapes operate, the idea of a landscape within a landscape, and how we might portray that within a collection. So we're interested in these kind of skylines and the way the sky and the earth are depicted in paintings, and realized that it didn't matter when they were painted or if it was European or American, that they shared the same quality of maybe changing the sky, and even in a Sherry Wolf. But what we did in this case was we decided to hang all of the landscapes by the skyline, so even if the paintings aren't correct, you can look at the world and forget about the authorship of the artist or the art maker. So in the case of the double horizon line, we followed that, and we go through Europe and America, we go through decades of time, and the painter in this case is not as important as the world. This is an amazing painting that's probably well known by everyone in this room. It's called Harvest by Michael Brophy, and we knew that we wanted to anchor the room with this as well. So in the exhibition space, the Brophy is opposite the Bierstadt. However, because of the public being in the way, meaning the sculptures, you can never see the room completely. You have to walk around it, and as you do that, you're constantly editing history. More logging photos and a beautiful painting of a young man sketching the forest in a forest.
It's Edward Curtis.
What we realized by doing this program is that when you have landscapes, they perform in this kind of sometimes romantic or this idealized way about how the world might be. But what we learned, and what Austin really called out, is how the figure works in a landscape or in a painting. So we went from 1 to 2, and we thought about Adam and Eve. And as we went through the collection, it seemed that the more people in a painting, the more complicated the story, and how the story about people's lives shifted the way the landscape was perceived. That's really dramatic.
It was really an intense installation.
The installation team here is, I swear, the best in the world.
That centerpiece is so heavy. Each piece requires a crane or.
So in addition to what we did for the exhibition, we also did a suite of companion projects. We're almost done with the talk, but this is at Wyden and Kennedy Gallery. It's the Cultural We exhibition that was done with the youth of Caldera, in which they learned from our process here to create work that spoke to their family lives.
D'Angelo Raines did a piece about different handshakes where the public, that's Christopher Dibble, he's over there, shook hands with some of the actors. That's Bill Kravis did a monument to bicycles. And
Aaron Lish did this wonderful piece about speaking to the river, the Willamette, and hearing the conversation come back. Tawny Holt did a performance piece upstairs about apples and pomegranates.
And Natalie Ball did a war hoop in the Paradise exhibit where a bunch of her tribes members and other people came and war hooped for a minute. It was incredible. And then somebody gave her a contract that gave her America back afterwards. So that was pretty funny.
And Jess Perlitz became a rock, moving a rock. And then she came and looked at Bierstadt. It was pretty awesome.
But yeah, we created a piece that went out from the museum out into the park blocks called Division of Identification. And we were thinking maybe about who's not allowed in Paradise. We found a bunch of photos in the, or it's kind of a slam book in the PDX archives about vagrants from the end of the 1940s. And it was basically an idea to clean up the streets. And so men and women were labeled either prostitutes or immoral. And so we took all these headshots of them, and then we put just the profiles next to each other.
What we learned from this archive, we do a lot of research, and what's fascinating about this particular archive is that A, it's allowed to exist in public record, but B, that the people that were arrested had two qualities that were unusual. One is that they typically did not look angry, and two is that they all were arrested for a social crime in public space. And they were arrested prior to the Miranda Act, so you could be arrested just for being. There was no due diligence on making the police department accountable. Anyway, that's our talk, and this is what we do.